Thank you for your patience, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Enough chit-chat, Dave. First off, to everyone here and online, and if you're watching this as the replay, thank you for watching the replay. Good stuff to come. Thank you for being here and your patience for us getting all started here. And just to start off, it's always good to end, but I think just as appropriate to start with gratitude. So just a big note of gratitude to the folks here at First Church Tacoma for letting us use their space. So thank you so much. Please round of applause for yes, absolutely. Good for the If you have any questions about the beautiful stained glass they've had recently redone up above, lovely 12-year-old Jesus right there looking down on you, the beautiful building, everything. Julie is back there. She is a member here. She's been so great helping us out this morning and everything. So any questions afterwards, if you haven't had a chance, please bend, you'll lean your ear over there and listen to what she's got to say. Just lovely. Bathrooms. For the ladies in the audience, there are two stage, your stage right, over there, down the stairs, men over here to the left. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Pretty simple agenda. There'll be a board report, treasurer's report, secretary report. Along the way, we'll go ahead and get the approval for the upcoming budget for this fiscal year, as well as electing a new set of board members for this coming fiscal year as well. And then we'll have a great inspirational talk from Trevor Yates, who will be online on the screen right where I'm standing. And then most important part, introduce from the field this year. So always so good. But just to begin with the board report, and it's not my strong suit, but I'll do my best to be brief. Excuse me.
No sound.
The theme this year that we have, Embraced Fully, it's not by accident that it's also using the same nomenclature and verbiage of
What's going out?
Organization, Embraced Fully. That if you were here last year, you heard about, and just briefly, they focus specifically on nurturing and helping out those who are recently released from incarceration. Really needed, untapped area. I want to make sure I know, including Washington, there's often a requirement that if you're there visiting someone, for example, as an inmate, on a volunteer basis, you're not allowed to be in contact with them for a period of time after they're released. And so that contact person that maybe they've had the whole time they were incarcerated isn't there. And so Embrace Fully is really on a national level there to provide that nurturing for them. And our speaker last year, David Fowler, was co-founder of that organization. Lovely, fantastic talk. If you haven't heard it or you weren't here, it's available for replay on our website, CSCIWA.org. Again, that's CSCIWA.org. This annual meeting will also be available for replay there. But I bring that up and give that context because kind of naturally for us as a board, as we worked through a handful of things this year, the basis of this theme of really seeing how we all are embraced fully, completely, and wholeheartedly wrapped up and surrounded and inhabited by divine love. That being our basis for any decisions as advisory board members that we've had to do, and certainly as we embrace and really pray and think about the folks that are in the institutions that we're supporting, to know, as many, if not all of you know, my history includes spending time incarcerated, and at my time incarcerated, nothing was more tangible and comforting to know that even there in the prison cell, there was no lack of peace or comfort or a sense of home, and that full embracing it doesn't matter, as was the Psalm, the Whither Shall I Go song, whichever song that is. It talks about how regardless of where you go, God's right there with you. And that being our basis completely pulls the rug out from any standpoint of fear or worry or frustration or lack. None of that has any place when we're starting from the basis of every one of us as being completely embraced, completely wrapped up and surrounded by nothing but the divinity of goodness. And so that so easily applies to everything, folks in the institutions, our work as board members, the field workers that we have in the field, our reps, our churches, our communities, all of that. It doesn't apply any less or more to any of those. It's just so complete. And so that's been the basis of so much of our metaphysical work over this last year. And so it only seemed fitted for that to be our theme for this fiscal year's annual meeting. So with that, some of the things we've done, everything has been new for this particular board. Unlike years past, welcome Dave, unlike in years past, We have always had a stalwart staff member that's had a history of being on the board. And so if new board members, as they come on, had any questions, we've always been able to point and say, hey, so-and-so, what's the answer to this question? As of right now, we don't have anyone serving on the board as a staff member or as a board member that's been on this committee longer than 2 years. So just about every question that comes up, it's been a new thing for all of us. And so the learning curve has been steep. So thank you for everyone here and online for your patience with us as we figure that out. And before I go on, I want to give a huge note of gratitude to someone who really filled in and stepped in as both our treasurer and secretary last fiscal year and a little bit into this fiscal year, and has been instrumental and integral in maneuvering and helping the folks that are in the roles now sitting in place. Emily Odell, if you're listening live or listening to the replay, thank you so much for everything you did for us for that 18-month period, roughly. So with that, our new, I want to just introduce them, you'll hear reports from them both, but our treasurer now, so wonderful, and the work that's had to be done with shuffling paperwork, putting the correct formats on the computers, everything. Laverna Donovan is our great treasurer. Thank you so much, Laverna. Totally lovely. And our secretary, who's joining us online, who you'll hear a report from now, Jessica Brown. Both of them have just been so great, and I think it's fair to say, even as board member, that the learning curve and the amount of work to get everything in place so that allow the dust settle has primarily been on those two shoulders, and they've just done such a big job. It's been really, really good. So thank you both for your patience with us. But with all of that, some of the things that the board has done in an effort to reestablish everything is clarify our role as the advisory board for the Christian Science Committee of Institutional Work in Washington State. And that role is directly to serve the folks in the institutions that we're supporting. Primarily when those funds are going are to support sending periodicals or books by request. And then our other role is one of support. We often talk about, I know a guy who knows a guy. We're that person in terms of contacts. We don't have all the answers to all the specific regs for any specific unit anywhere in the state, but if nothing else, we have been working to just refresh and compile our lists so that if someone, say in Ellensburg, wants to support facilities or institutions out there, we can at least say, hey, these are these institutions, and this is the chaplain, the resident minister, activities coordinator, here's their number, talk to this guy, and we can help facilitate and direct that, and most importantly, support prayerfully. And I'll touch on that in a bit. But that support for the field workers and directly to those folks in the institutions, and those institutions are broad. It's not just prisons or jails. It can be memory care facilities, rehab facilities, juvenile detention centers. All of those are under wherever each individual community wants to serve. And so supporting that activity as much as we can via our contacts, that's been a real specific focus. And one of the things that the board has done is taking all the churches in the state, splitting them up into 4 different piles and saying, hey, this group of churches, let's contact them. If they have a rep, let's contact their rep. If they don't have a rep, let's contact their clerk. And if we don't have that information, let's look them up on the Christian Science directory and touch base and leave a message or something. And so we hope to continue that work and just making our commitment to supporting our reps and our churches as accessible as possible. Our role or function does not, and this puts our importance and our gratitude for our reps, in that the reps are there to inform individual churches and their individual communities. And so our job is to support the reps to do that, to empower them however we can. And so the board members, real quick, I'll introduce them. I'm Jay Blau. I had the pleasure of serving as the chair of this committee. Over here, controlling mission control over here is Alan Hatfield, hailing out of Swim, Washington. We've got Iberian, the man who defines the word delightful, Jim Gold, right here. And you know him, love him, my father, Dave Lau, right there. Those are the members that comprised our board this year. And between the 4 of us have been reaching out and wanting to just, as we've been juggling all the balls of figuring out all the questions just internally to run this with all the new people, we've been really wanting to really cherish that relationship and continue communication with the other groups that are in place. There's an area committee in Snohomish and King, Washington that we trade minutes with, the letter writers committee that we've been wanting to touch base with, even the joint literature distribution committee, who's been so great on taking up the mantle of sending out Science and Health to other periodicals to local county jails. Lots of great work going on, despite some of the COVID regulations that have, or as my mother would put it, COVID regulations that have yet to be lifted. the work persists and continues, and that'll be borne out in the fruitage reports today. So just so much that we've been doing. It's been a whirlwind. Like the learning curve has been steep, but it has felt, and the board will kind of backing up on this, that the dust has settled a bit, and there's just a lovely firm footing going forward into this next year. And so we're really eager to just see this continued growth on the basis of knowing that we're all so embraced fully. And to end with a quote that speaks to the stock and trade of us, as if you're on Zoom, if you could mute yourself pretty please, that'd be great. To use a quote that really explains the potency of our prayer, which is our stock and trade as Christian Science. It's not mere well wishes, but if ever you're wondering, hey, can I do more, but I don't want to go into prisons, or maybe that doesn't make sense, your prayer makes a difference. It's effective prayer. The second that we feel that our prayer isn't enough or not that big of a deal, that's wrong. Prayer is effective because we have this basis of divine fact of our full embrace of God. And so to use that quote, I've always thought of it as just the potency and the reach of that effective prayer in Science and Health, in the chapter on Genesis, which is that he writes, the sunlight glints from the church dome, glances into the prison cell, glides into the sick chamber, brightens the flower, beautifies the landscape, blesses the earth. So that's what we're here to do today. So thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and move the screen over, and we're going to have our, no, I'm not, Treasurer's Report is next. We're going to have our Treasurer's Report next by Laverta. Thank you all so much for being here. Not so great on the brief part, but I appreciate you all listening all the same. Thank you so much.
I'm going to open my report with reading of hymn 148 from the Christian Science Hymnal. Excuse me. In heavenly love abiding, no change my heart shall fear, and safe is such confiding, for nothing changes here. The storm may roar without me, my heart may low be laid, but God is round about me, and can I be dismayed? Wherever he may guide me, no want shall turn me back. My shepherd is beside me, and nothing can I lack. His wisdom ever waketh, his sight is never dim. He knows the way he taketh, and I will walk with him. Green pastures are before me, which yet I have not seen. Bright skies will soon be o'er me, where darkest clouds have been. My hope I cannot measure. My path in life is free. My Father has my treasure, and he will walk with me. So I passed out our profit and loss. It's the budget versus the actual, comparing how much we actually spent last year to how much we budgeted on spending and bringing in. I have to take my glasses off so I can read. If you were looking at it, those of you on Zoom, I'm sorry you don't have a copy, but you can see that from our income, we budgeted a total of $19,000 and some beyond that. And we actually brought in $20,607. So that's the bottom line. There is some stuff going on above here where you see where we didn't meet budget in some spaces, and we got more than we budgeted for. It all came into a net of being $1,491 over our expected budget. Now the bottom half are our expenses, and you'll see that we have some expenses we didn't actually have an expense for, and then some things we went over budget a bit, but in the end, instead of ending up at a negative $8,700, which is what we had budgeted, we were only at a negative $1,289. I know that's a negative, but we do have a, what you call an investment account that we pull the difference from. So that's been good news. On the back side, we are going to see the budget, but before we get to our budget, I wanted to, well, maybe I should go ahead and talk about the budget. This is our proposed budget for the upcoming year. with a gross profit of, or a total income of $21,911, with total expenses being $25,780, which does leave us with a negative net income of $3,869. Is it appropriate to report that we did receive a large gift?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, we're so grateful that to receive a gift from a church in, I'm so sorry, the state is suddenly
Maryland, right?
Maryland. We received a gift from a church in Maryland that has closed. So it's a large gift, $10,000. So that is not in the budget because it came after we put our budget together. But you have the budget, and am I supposed to ask for a vote or something?
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have Jake do that part.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll stay right here.
I'm brand new.
Yeah, no. So one of the big things that we're going to do, you have the numbers right there, that the board is bringing forward this proposed budget, and we're here to have the reps and everyone present here to approve this budget for the committee. This committee is here subserving to the churches, and so this is what we're presenting for you to approve. So we're just here to ask any questions of the board, but this is a motion being brought forward. So if we could have a motion in a second, and then discussion, and at that point, so moved by Susan Anderson. Thank you, Susan. Second by Mary Ann Peterson. That's what I'm talking. We're cooking with gas now. Any discussion or questions? Liberta, back to you.
Please, if you have any questions.
So they can hear them. So my question is, first of all, what is the size of the investment account? That's the first question. What's the size of it? And how is it invested? Is it making any interest?
Thank you for that question. The investment account currently has a little over $52,000 in it. And let me just look at our, so I don't have an answer about how it's, but if I see only $5 in interest here, I'm thinking it's not.
And I can speak to that. Yeah. So
Jake
yeah,
knows.
absolutely. Yeah. So referring it to an investment account is somewhat not accurate as of right now. So about a year and a half ago, would you say, the investment account that we had under circumstances from the person who was holding the portfolio had to be completely liquidated. And so at the time, we just put all the money we had, which at the time was holding around 52,000, I believe, and we just put that into a savings account that was attached. And as we've had the turnover of secretaries and treasurers and figuring that out, it's been a tabled item to have that reinvested. But we have been in touch with an investment provider, a little Christian Scientist that I went to class with. And so that's one of the bigger priorities this coming fiscal year, is to put that money where it's getting more interest. But right now, that $5 is just the interest that's collecting as it's sitting in a savings account. So it's not much.
So my other, I just lost. It says here that you have an annual grant from the Mother Church. So do you reapply each year, or is this an ongoing grant?
We have to reapply each year, and I'm in the middle of filling out that grant application now that I have all the information that they want, which I wanted to give a report on, but I want to finish the questions and answers if anyone has any more questions about last year and about the upcoming year. Okay. So our gifting.
Oh, sorry, hold on one second. If there's no more discussion,
Okay.
then we'll go ahead and call this thing to a vote. Absolutely, let's get this thing approved.
It's on the table.
Absolutely, yeah. So motion is the proposed budget to approve. That's my motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No. All those in favor say, or all those opposed say nay. Please, yes.
So I think it is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is the reps that are the ones who vote.
Absolutely, yes. I'm so sorry, yes.
So if we can identify perhaps who the reps are here today?
Absolutely, yeah. Anyone here a rep for their church? Awesome. Dave Flieger, for Seattle, Susan Anderson, for Cambridge. Online, is anyone saying that they're reps? Al Heffel for Squim, fantastic.
Swim's a rep.
Do we have a quorum?
Alan, is anyone sending anything in the chat or anything saying that they're a rep?
I'm the rep for Kent Church.
Thank you so much. Just want to get a number of number of reps, so if we can just tally that up. We've got 3 in the room here.
CSCIWA Huntsville, Maryland. That's the 12th Church, Seattle.
Great.
Oh, and a rep from Kent.
Yep, okay.
Did you say Huntsville?
Yeah.
And Patricia from Mercer Island.
Good, great. And so it's just a majority that we need of the sustaining churches. So if I remember correctly, the sustaining churches, what we need is 6 reps to have a quorum. I think that's already 6 right there. Brian, you mentioned 4 online, 3 in here. So of those reps, by raising hand, those approved in the room to approve the budget. Fantastic, awesome. But that's a quorum right there. So the motion passes to approve this budget. Well done. Thank you for that note, Jim. Okay, we're all figuring this out, so I appreciate your patience. Oh, yes, and online, it sounds like you read the folks from Maryland that have attended that also gave us that generous gift at Laverna. Thank you for being here today. We love you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so great that you're here. Perfect. Thank you so much.
That was amazing. So we have given, and I'm looking at calendar year from January to December. And that's anticipating what we have subscriptions we give. We have given away or gifted 312 Sentinels, 6,864 monitors, 252 full text quarterlies, 12 journals, and 48 full text Bible lessons in Spanish, for a total of 7,488 periodicals gifted this year.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Absolutely, Captain Tracy.
Oh, it's a short question. Just remind me, please, the distributions go to individuals, agencies, who gets these lovely gifts?
So the bulk of the gifts go to institutions themselves. The chaplains have requested that many periodicals come to that particular institution. And then we have some inmates who have requested their own personal subscription. And then we have chaplains that we gift to as well. Yep. Thanks. You're welcome. That is respectfully submitted, Laverna.
Thank you, Laverna. Real quick, we'll grab the screen, and Jessica, we're online. You are going to give our secretary's report. Here she is, beautiful Jessica, and all her glory. Wonderful Jessica, fire away with your secretary's report.
Great, thanks, Jake. So I first want to join in everyone's expressions of gratitude for our outgoing secretary, treasurer, Emily Odell. She's just wonderful. We're so grateful. And as Jake mentioned, I've joined this effort relatively recently. So far, I've been supporting the advisory board with meeting minutes and coordination. And it's just been so touching, reading the letters, the poems, the correspondence from these dear ones who are temporarily residing in an institution. And I'm just profoundly grateful for the workers who are visiting and corresponding, writing letters, just in support of these dear ones who just temporarily are residing someplace other than home, and they need the support of an institution or correction temporarily. I'm just so grateful to be supporting workers who are devoted to shining the light of the Christ where it's so needed. Thanks.
Last thing we're going to do before we get into our speaker is board members. So each year, there's always some rotation in office that goes on. The board, the advisory board committee can have, excuse me, anywhere between 5 3 to 5 board members. Currently, we have 4, and so there is, even if all 4 are continue to be nominated to stay on, there's still an additional person that can be included in that. And up until now, it didn't need to be someone that was nominated months ago. If you feel right now that you want to nominate someone or nominate yourself, don't hesitate. Looking at you, reps. But with that, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, that all 4 of the current board members, myself, Jim Gold, Dave Lau, and Alan Halfhill, are happy to continue to serve and be nominated for the next year. And we also have a nomination, I believe, from Mr. Foster from Spokane.
Yeah, Mike Foster.
Mike Foster from Spokane, which is great. Having representation on that side of the mountains is wonderful. So that's wonderful. At this point, like anyone on Zoom or here, anyone else that would like to be nominated for these board elections? Okay. Just making sure. Anyone said anything on chat at all? Just to double check.
No.
Okay, great. So with that, 5 folks are nominated. With that, and this is just for reps to vote on, I believe, as well. If someone wants to just have, I guess I'll go ahead and put out there, just for all the 5 people that have been nominated to continue on as the next one with the new addition of Mr. Foster from Spokane. I'd like to put that out there to accept another term. Length of term is 2 years. And if you serve, so for 3 of us, Alan, Jim, and myself, we've served, this marks 2 years, and our bylaws allow for another consecutive term of 2 years. And so the 3 of us have agreed to happen to continue that second term. And Dave will finish out his second year of his term, and Mike will join as a new face. So if that's kind of what's out there. So for reps to approve or yay or nay that, I don't think it's a matter of motion. I think it's just a matter of voting on that suggestion from the nomination. So for that election, for those 5 to be included, all in favor, reps, please raise your hand. 2, 4, 5. And then online, if you can either wave at Alan or send a thumbs up in the chat or something, just to have that on record as well. I guess the important question, anyone opposed to any of that? Better, and Susan says you better not. Fantastic team you got here. Wonderful. Well, that's great. Thank you to the 4 of you, and welcome, Mike Foster. Mike, if you could stay on the meeting afterwards, the board is going to have a quick meeting essentially to welcome in our new member and set our new meeting date. So it's a very brief meeting, so stay on the Zoom meeting afterwards, Mike. But that is our new board. Thank you all so much for that. And we're excited to continue serving and continue moving forward and supporting folks in our institutions. So with that, the headliner, here we go. Trevor Yates from New York, our speaker this year. We are so fortunate due to some scheduling things and things that need to be worked out. Our initial speaker, the lovely Trevor Yates, and was not able to be our speaker this year. And so within this week, maybe 6 days, we're able to reach out to Trevor Yates, who's a science practitioner out in New York. He's actually we get essentially an abridged version of this talk, but we're going to, the full talk that he's giving on the subject of work, watch, and pray is going to be aired tomorrow for the New York Institutional Annual Committee's meeting. And of course, this will be on our replay as well. So if you like what you heard or want to hear a little more details, perhaps more examples than he has time to share today, that's available. Having the chance to talk with Trevor this week, just yesterday, to get a little sense. His resume alone includes being a chaplain in men's and women's correctional facilities in Vermont and Massachusetts. He was a visiting nurse in New York for a couple of years. I mean, just the heart of this man. But there's just such a childlike innocence and expectation that he has in this heart for work, and it's such a genuine excitement. And so, just as of January, he went into the Journal as a full-time Christian Science practitioner. And so, just with a wealth of experience, specifically with this, as well as just such a heart for Christian Science and its effect. And I've just loved the thinking of the topic of his talk, work, watch, and pray, being ultimately the thing that gives our theme of being embraced fully teeth. It gives us kind of what our role is to see that demonstrated. So I am so eager and excited to introduce live from New York this morning. It is Trevor Yates. Please give him a big warm round of applause. Trevor, we're going to get you on screen. I'll give you your cue and you can start. But Trevor, you're on, buddy.
Well, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you, Jake, for that wonderful introduction. Grateful to be here. Would love to thank the Christian Science Committee for institutional work there in Washington State for the opportunity to talk with you all today. Thank you. You'll see that the ideas that I share today will touch on this theme of being fully embraced. As was mentioned by Jake in the introduction, before moving to New York City, I served as a chaplain in men's and women's prisons in Vermont, as well as jails in Massachusetts. And I'm currently a volunteer chaplain at Rikers Island, which is a jail in New York Harbor. And in this role, rather than providing Christian Science services, the facility has asked me to provide what they call pastoral counseling, or in other words, just sharing a spiritual perspective with the men in custody. And I'm happy to do that. I'm grateful for the wonderful work taking place there in Washington, here in New York, and all of the states in between. I'm grateful for the work each of you are doing, whether as a volunteer in an institution or in prayerfully supporting this important work. I thought I'd start with a little humor today. So, a question: what do you call a vegetable who has escaped from prison? An escape pea. Now, if you see what I did there, that joke was so bad that our talk today can only get better. It can't get much worse than that joke. But I do find that humor can be helpful in our institutional ministries, just to break the mesmerism of the human drama. Jail and prison, to the human sense, can seem a dark or depressing environment, and I certainly don't wish to make light of one's incarceration. The removal of an individual from their home, family, friends, and community is a loss of freedom few of us have had to contend with. Combining this with jails or prisons which may not feel safe or support the individual's freedom, even while serving time, is something that deserves reform as well as our prayers. But today, I'd like to talk about what we're seeing or witnessing to in the institutions that this committee supports with its activity. For me, one place to start, or that I'm mindful of, is to question the assumptions that I may be thinking. Is prison a dark and depressing place? If I consented to this description, then how am I supposed to help? Am I bringing the light of the Christ to these dark and depressing prison cells? Well, I'd like to share a story. It doesn't involve jail or prison per se, but we'll come back to this, I promise. I was away once, some distance from home, in another country with my kids. At this time, I was staying with friends, and my daughter was less than a year old. Now, she was usually a good sleeper, but it seemed with the travel that she wasn't, or perhaps I wasn't, feeling peaceful and settled. For the first 3 nights of our stay with these friends, my daughter woke in the night and cried. This house, while nice and comfortable, was much like a jail or prison in its design, with cement walls and concrete floors. The effect of this was, when my infant daughter woke in the night, her little cries echoed and reverberated off the walls and floors throughout the house. One of the family members who was hosting us had a very important job at a bank where they were expected to be early each morning. And this same family member also happened to be a very light sleeper. So each time my daughter woke in the night, it would often take my host an hour or two to return to sleep. And as I prayed about this, I knew that my child and I could only be a blessing. And I also knew it was right for my hosts to feel comforted and rested in order to perform well in their workplace. This visit involved the loving gesture on these hosts opening their home to me and my children. and the loving gesture of me sharing the blessed joy that I was certain my children are for the world. And this included sharing their blessing with his family. However, somehow it didn't appear to be a blessing. Despite praying along these lines each night, after 3 wakeful nights, my hosts finally said they were sorry to say, but it might not work out for us to stay with them and visit as long as I and we were hoping. So on the 4th night, my daughter woke, and I picked her up and carried her quickly down to the kitchen so we could be as far away from everyone else in the house, with the hope that her little cries wouldn't wake the others. And as I prayed, I reached out so earnestly to God and asked, what do I need to know? And the answer that I got is this: you didn't go anywhere. The light of the Christ dawned on my consciousness, and I knew exactly what that meant. You see, I had spent so much time thinking what a wonderful and rare opportunity this visit would be for my family, that I was focused more on the differences of our host's country, that I didn't think to pray about the continuity of good that it represented. The consistency of the Christ tells us that wherever we are, good is there. If we're in Timbuktu, good is there. If we're stranded in the middle of the sea, God, good is there. If we find ourselves volunteering in a jail or prison for a morning or afternoon, good is there. If one is in a jail, prison, reformatory, or hospital for a year or a decade, if we accept that institutions are places of darkness, then we're consenting to the notion that the Christ light just doesn't shine there, doesn't shine brightly there. When Mary Baker Eddy founded the Christian Science Monitor, she founded it with the mission to spread undivided the science that operates unspent. This science, God's law of good that is operating on man's behalf, operates unspent, unused up, and without limit. Monitor correspondents covering the war in Ukraine or the Middle East can point to very real challenges taking place right now. And what makes the Monitor so unique is that it shines a light on the good, even within the seeming devastation, to the science, to the good that is ever present. So as I stood in this friend's kitchen with my infant daughter in my arms, I suddenly realized that I hadn't gone anywhere because I hadn't left God's kingdom. It came to me like this: because God is omnipresent, the kingdom of God is everywhere. Since the kingdom of God is everywhere, then did I really go anywhere else? For example, if you're standing in one corner of your living room and you walk over to the other corner of your living room, do you jump up and down, celebrate, and make a big deal about it? No, because you know you haven't really gone anywhere. You just went from one side of the room to the other. Well, if we've just gone from one part of the kingdom to another part of the kingdom, what's the big deal? The continuity of God's goodness is just as real and present here as it is there. It was just as real in this friend's kitchen as it was in my kitchen. With this thought, my daughter felt the peace that I felt. She fell asleep in my arms, and she slept the rest of that night and didn't wake during the nights for the rest of the trip. The key here to understand is to understand that the comfort that comes from recognizing the allness of God and our inseparability from it. God good is just as present in the institutions this committee serves as it is in our churches. Whether a window has stained glass in it or bars, Are we looking to the material differences or the perpetuity of spiritual good going on endlessly, unspent? If the people we visit are wearing prison-mandated orange jumpsuits, are we looking to their material clothing or their unique expression of soul by looking them in the eye rather than at their clothing to better understand who they are and who God created them to be? There is no darkness with the light of divine love. As Eddie writes, divine science, the word of God, saith to the darkness upon the face of error, God is all in all, and the light of ever-present love illumines the universe. If the light of ever-present love illumines the universe, this certainly includes institutions such as jails and prisons. For this reason, prisons are not dark and depressing places. I say that, and yet some people may feel, really? They certainly may seem to be dark and depressing. And the thing is, we too often rely on our human senses or the nightly news or popular culture like TV or movies to form our ideas of these institutions. What the human senses tell us are not to be trusted because they more often than not don't tell the whole story. The human senses, often steeped in faulty human logic, would also say that the earth is flat and that the sun revolves around the earth. Well, we know this to be false. The earth is round, not flat, and the earth revolves around the sun. So too, if we go into a jail relying on only what material sense testimony tells us what's true about our surroundings, it may convince us that this prison isn't as bad as we thought it might be, or it might suggest that it's much worse. Thankfully, we can ignore sense testimony because God provides us with spiritual sense, the ability to discern and see more of what God sees. Our job is to use less human sense and more spiritual sense. In miscellaneous writings, our leader writes, science reverses the evidence of material sense with the spiritual sense that God, Spirit, is the only substance and that man, his image and likeness, is spiritual, not material. Earlier, I mentioned that I try to check my assumptions, such as the question of, am I bringing the light of the Christ to these dark and depressing prison cells? Well, I feel like we've addressed that part in rejecting the notion that prisons are dark or depressing places. Because one, the kingdom of God is everywhere. Two, because the light of love illumines even the darkest places. And three, because when we use our spiritual sense, we more readily recognize the good that is going on. Mary Baker Eddy writes, love, redolent with unselfishness, bathes all in beauty and light. The sunlight glints from the church dome, glances into the prison cell, glides into the sick chamber, brightens the flower, beautifies the landscape, blesses the earth. So if we don't see these institutions as absent of light, what if this notion or idea of us bringing in the Christ light with our visits? What do I mean by the Christ light? Ms. Eddy defines Christ as the divine manifestation of God, which comes to the flesh to destroy incarnate error. And Paul speaks of the light when he writes, awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. The Christ light is that divine manifestation of God that enlightens our understanding. In going into these institutions, it's lovely to share inspiration and a God-centered view of creation. And it's satisfying when we feel God is using us for good, to cast light on what might otherwise be a darkened thought. And as lovely as this is, I wonder if we might go a little deeper. There may be other ways of thinking about why we're making these visits. One thing I've found helpful is to understand that I'm not bringing the Christ, but that the Christ is already present. And when we see that we don't have to bring the Christ light, the Christ welcomes us in. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians, "For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, hath shined in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." As we recognize the light already present, we're not giving the light as much as we're giving the light of the knowledge of the glory of God. Seeing each person knows or is able to know God is such a precious gift for others and ourselves. In Miscellany, Massetti writes that the sun stands for God, then all his rays collectively stand for Christ, and each separate ray for men and women. We have never brought the light or been the source of light. We simply bring the understanding of the science that each one of the individuals, these children of God we get to encounter, is a ray of light from that one divine source. When we think of the experience of Joseph, who was thrown into prison by Potiphar after being wrongfully accused by Potiphar's wife, there's no evidence that Joseph thought of his confinement as a dark and troubling time. He shined his light there just as brightly as he shined his light before and after. It's likely because Joseph was not downcast and expressed an expectancy in good that the keeper of the prison saw that the Lord was with Joseph and placed him in charge of those in the prison. So what enabled Joseph to be so expectant of good? His faith in God. Faith or trust in God is often aligned with the other fruit of the Spirit, known as long-suffering. But I think patience is a better word. Long-suffering conjures images of, well, long-suffering. But did Joseph suffer? He endured hardships, but at no point does the book of Genesis indicate that he felt he was suffering. And why? Because he expressed patience. Notice I didn't say because he had patience, but he expressed patience. When we have faith in God and know the science of good will continue to unfold its law of goodness for us as we strive to listen for mind's leading, then we can be patient or express more patience. One of the things I've noticed is that we often misunderstand patience, as if patience is a possession that we amass over time. And when required, when annoying little things happen throughout our day or in our lives, that we dole out a little bit of that patience here and there. And when we've just had enough, or as the world calls it, fed up, then we're no longer patient, or we've lost our patience, and things get more difficult for us and others. But what's been so helpful for me is to see that patience is not something that I own, acquire, or possess, but is simply a quality that I and we all get to express. When we think of patience as a quality, it's easier to see how it's unlimited. like kindness. If I'm kind to a clerk in a convenience store and then to a dog on the street, do I use up all my kindness such that I have no more kindness left to share with my family or friends later in the day? Kindness and its source, love, are unlimited. We can never run out of it. So too, patience comes from the same infinite source of love, and it too is unlimited. The only thing that would limit our expression of patience is a belief in the limit of patience. Why is this essential? Well, I'm convinced that a greater expression of patience will help heal the world. When it comes to physical challenges, we'll stop telling God to get on with it and that we don't have time for this. We'll patiently learn that God knows no time and no sickness, and we'll see what God sees. When we're all more patient with each other, then we're more easily able to love one another. And if we're expressing patience, then we typically tend to feel calm, peaceful, and comforted. This helps others feel similarly. Then all of a sudden, everyone is beginning to feel more peaceful, calm, patient, and expectant. And furthermore, when we express greater patience, we're able to hear the ideas that are needed to move us forward with grace. As we're approaching the Thanksgiving holiday, there's a story I'd like to share. One year, I was traveling for work, and I drove to my destination and had plans to fly to meet my family in Canada for the Thanksgiving holiday. The night before I was to fly up to join them, I noticed that I did not have my passport. I looked online, and according to the Transportation Safety Administration website, I could fly without a passport if I had other forms of ID. I brought these with me along with a printout of that page from the TSA website and headed to the airport to catch my flight. When I spoke to the ticketing agent at the airport, she wouldn't let me board the flight. I spoke to her manager, and she too wouldn't let me board the plane. I showed them the printout from the TSA website, but it made no difference. This being the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and my family being in Canada waiting for me to arrive, I was not only feeling impatient, but starting to feel a little angry as well. And when I recognized this, I was reminded of what a line that Miss Eddy says in Science and Health. An ill-tempered, complaining, or deceitful person should not be a nurse. Now, I think we're all meant to nurse each other, and not just if one isn't feeling well. We nurse family members, neighbors, coworkers, and colleagues anytime we do something nice and show we care about them. Those serving on the Christian Science Institutional Committee are expressing an abundance of nursing qualities. So, thinking of these qualities, I stepped out of the line at the airport to consider what to do. And I reasoned that just because I forgot my passport does not give me the right to be ill-tempered or complaining. I quieted my thought and found the ability to express more patience, and in so doing, an idea came. I was 5 hours from my home, so I would drive to the house, get my passport, and I would rebook my flight to Canada from that city rather than the airport I was currently in. They rebooked my flight with enough time to allow me to make the drive and with no change fees. You'd think that would be the end, but there were still more opportunities to express patience to come. You see, I arrived at the house and couldn't find my passport. You'll recall that I was assured that I would be able to board the plane with my alternate IDs, as the website suggested. So I assured my family members that I would meet them in Canada. Well, I found that my family very lovingly brought my passport with them on their flight to Canada, thinking that it might be helpful for me to have it on my return trip back to the States. What was I to do? Was this an excuse to be ill-tempered or complaining? I knew my family was motivated by love and a desire to help. So I knew there was no punishment for me or for them. I knew in all of this that it was not my legs or a car or a plane that was moving me. I was moved by love itself. God, love, is what moves me, motivates me, and maintains me. It was now Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. And while I was open to not celebrating the Thanksgiving holiday the next day with my family, I was most interested in learning where love wanted me to be. Because I was learning more about love, I found the ability to express more patience and listen for other ideas. And the idea came that I would drive to Canada. It was an 11-hour drive, and if I left now and rested somewhere along the way, I would make it there by early afternoon. I still had to cross the border with a driver's license and no passport, and my family was willing to drive the 4 hours from their home to meet me at the border if the border agent required it, which thankfully he did not. He listened to my tale, let me through, and I enjoyed Thanksgiving with my family. And I can say I've never left my passport behind since this time. However, the moral of the story for me is not the importance of travel documents or the holidays or family, but it's about the spiritual qualities that we express and seeing each situation, good or bad, as an opportunity to think about the qualities we're expressing. These qualities comprise our spiritual substance. And as we think about and learn about the spiritual qualities we express, we learn more of who we are as God's spiritual idea expressing Him. Imagine how long that 5 and then 11-hour drive might have felt if I indulged in feelings of impatience about the airline agents, family members, or myself. The drive was joyful. Long, but joyful. And thinking about that account of Joseph in the Bible, although I was in a car, not in prison, similar to Joseph, this is not what I would have planned for myself. For many of those people in custody that we get to minister to, so to speak, this also is not what they would have planned for themselves. So the question is, how can we help those who we have the opportunity to work with be patient and expectant? Well, the story of Joseph's time in jail is a good place to start. And rather than just thinking of it as an inspirational story, along with having faith in God and being expectant of the good to come, Joseph was not terribly worried about what other people thought of him. He loved God and trusted that to be enough. Joseph had no fear. He didn't worry that others were out to get him. He knew the omnipotence of God would and did care for him fully. And the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in this week's Bible lesson is another example. These 3 Hebrew boys were thrown into jail and sentenced to death by a fiery furnace. They were patient and expectant that God would deliver them. They knew that their safety in the furnace had nothing to do with a human measurement of time. It had and has for all of us to do with God's ever-present good protection. Mary Baker Eddy begins our textbook, "To those leaning on the sustaining infinite, today is big with blessings." Today. And we've talked about a lot today. We covered the topic of how we're seeing these institutions, those we're supporting, and our role in all of this. These institutions are far from dark and depressing. Love is illumining the hearts and minds of those we visit with a gift, the opportunity for rebirth. We discussed the idea that we're not the bearers of the light, but witnesses to it. The answers these men and women are seeking lie within them, and the Christ is communicating what they need to hear, and they can hear it. We talked about how patience is something to be expressed, and Joseph, whose faith in God, expectancy of good, and patience is a model for all of us. Each of the men, women, and teens this committee supports is fully embraced by divine love. Each of you is fully embraced by this same divine love. As Eddie writes, the song of Christian Science is work, 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 watch and pray. Thank you for your working. Thank you for your watching. And thank you for your praying.
Thank you, Trevor, for you stepping in and being beautiful, beautiful, beautiful talk. Thank you. At this point, we're going to finish up some fruitage reports.
There we go.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to share. I'm Susan Anderson, for those of you online. As the coordinator for the letter writers, I have held a Zoom meeting with 5 of these writers every month for the last, 2 or 3 years. They have shared the results of correspondence with several inmates. They've written how it has benefited them. Since they are not able to come to the meeting in person today, I'm going to share what they sent me. I should also say we started this letter writer group as a result of being closed down in 2020, because those of us who were visitors, which I was as well, were not able to even write to the folks that we visited inside. So we sent a letter to all the churches in the state, inviting those who were not already visitors to be willing to write to folks that would normally be visited. And we had quite a few who volunteered. We also sent letters to those folks that the institutional committee chair sent letters to all those inside asking if they would like to have someone write for them. And there were quite a few to begin with, and it's narrowed down, but we've continued that work. So my first report is from Jan Kitsis, who is in Sweden. She writes, I've been writing letters to inmates in Washington State since 2021. One of them, Elio, was released from prison in June of this year and has returned to his native country of Guatemala. While he was in prison, Elio received visits from a Christian Science practitioner in Washington State. And he wrote to me fairly regularly and expressed gratitude for the Spanish full-text quarterly Bible lesson, which he received. This man's cellmate, whose name is Juan, must have seen the Bible lessons, and he became interested in them himself. He wrote to me and asked if he could also receive literature. He started receiving the Spanish full text quarterly in August of this year. He's written to me that he enjoys reading about God from a different perspective. In his latest letter, Juan expressed appreciation for a Sentinel article which I sent him entitled Christian Science Found Me by Patricia Sanchez. He quoted the following sentence from the article, quote, "I had always believed in God and was looking for something that would satisfy me and help me understand who I was and what my purpose was in life." Juan wrote that he feels that his own experience has been similar to that of the author. He also spoke of the importance of living in virtue and truth. Another inmate, David, receives the full text quarterly Bible lessons in English, as well as the Sentinel and the Monitor. For many months, he sent me letters in which he expressed gratitude for the literature, and he frequently included poems which he had written. I have not received any communication from him since he was transferred to a different correctional facility, although I've written to him there several times. I've recently made an additional effort to communicate with him. Here is one of David's poems. Expected harvest. Precious seeds of life still lie amongst the morning dew in fields of hope. Their growth up to us, quote, though we plant and water, the Lord giveth the increase, unquote. Serene and still in nurturing, planted, watered, loved, happy and blessed in the sunlight. We not only hope, but we foresee days of precious fruit. Years of restful labor, moments of pristine joy, realities that sprout from eternity into everlasting truths. Precious truths, sweet to the taste, and oh, what a wonder it is to see how well we've done. Pardon me. How well we've planted, how well we've watered, how well we've waited. The next one is from Nancy Martin, who now lives in California. Some time ago, after a couple of years of writing and supporting Emmanuel, including arranging for Rex Rudy from Bremerton to help him with the job interview and take him to the church in Chehalis, I continued writing him for a while after he reoffended. His letters became pleasant appreciation, but really the interest he showed early in Christian Science faded, and I didn't see any return to it. He finally asked that we stop writing. I'm not sure what caused the change, as he seemed to get ideas and hope for a changed life. Carlos suggested, I'm not sure who Carlos is, but anyway, suggested I keep writing, so I wrote to him 3 more times, but he didn't respond. That's probably been for 4 months. When he was out the first time and doing so well, I sent a few of the questions that were suggested from the Principal Foundation and Embrace Fully. I think they might have been alarming to him, though he didn't say anything. When I first started writing to an inmate named Jason, he had asked for someone to write to him, and I was happy to oblige. Although we talked some about God and his relationship to him, he was mostly interested in a pen pal type of communication, where we could talk about his art and dreams. He was released shortly after we began writing. At that time, the communication process was handwritten letters to and from the reading room, so it was not optimal. However, the next request I received was from someone who truly wanted to turn his life around, as he'd been incarcerated multiple times before the age of 30. He had seen a Christian Science church in the area where he worked before he was arrested, and wrote the church, who forwarded his letter to the Washington State Institutional Committee office, who asked for a volunteer. By that time, volunteers could purchase a certain number of emails as an account for both the letter writer and the inmate to utilize. They now have iPads in prison. It made communication much quicker and more satisfying. Although I moved out of state, the 2 years I spent in communication with him allowed me the opportunity to think and pray outside of my familiar box of language and phraseology, which in turn was a blessing for my own study. Rexane Rudy from Meriden. In my time as a letter writer, I've been blessed with a deeper understanding of the scriptural verse from Matthew 12:21, love thy neighbor as thyself, unquote. I spend time studying and praying to gain spiritual growth. So why shouldn't I share the inspiration with my neighbor who is spending his time in confinement? Sure, it seemed to take time to write a letter every week, but the blessings it has brought me has been a great reward. The lessons I've learned by preparing a gift of a letter have borne the fruit of thanks from the recipient. While I may not have heard from him frequently, the periodic posts in my mail were joyful and heartfelt, making the time I spent worthwhile. During the years of my activity, I've gained a stronger feeling of God's presence, which blesses me and my fellow man. From Mary Shea, who's now in Edmonds. First of all, years ago, I had very significant healing when I attended a state institutional committee meeting in Ohio. Ever since then, I have felt that I have an obligation, like I want to give back to the institutional work. Where I've lived, I've been involved. I read the lesson at a group home in Denver. In Detroit, 2 of us did a campaign to put monitors in all the prisons, which we did. It makes me feel good to reach out to you inmates. It's an enjoyable interchange with the man with whom I correspond at Monroe Correction Center. I always include a hymn in the cards I send. And just a side note, I visit Monroe prison to visit someone else, and it looks like I may be able to visit the man that she's writing as well. And then this is a bit of a report for Trinka Watson. She has been writing to Sergio at the Twin Rivers facility in the Monroe Correction Center. She was asked to write to him at the beginning of the COVID lockdown in 2020. He'd been introduced to Christian Science at the Clallam Bay Correction Center in 2015, when a group of us from Bainbridge Island started a Christian Science lesson student study group there. Eventually, Sergio joined the Mother Church. He came to our gatherings regularly until March 2020. Sometime in, I think, 2021, he was transferred to Monroe. Trinka and I applied for visitor status, and beginning in June this year, Trinka and I have visited Sergio once a month. He is eager to listen to us share truths with him. Lately, he is discouraged by so many interruptions to his study from cellmates and guards. So we are encouraging him in his prayers. And I'll tell you, Mr. Yates' talk today was, boy, can I not wait to share those ideas with him. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. And thank you to all our letter writers as well. Perfect. Perfect. Mary Ann, just want to come and share the movies from the field. It's the best stuff. Local Christian Science practitioner Mary Ann Peterson. She's the best.
Jake's the best. Okay. A returning community member found a Geraldo in Monroe Penitentiary. Elio wrote a letter to the Mother Church, February 7, 2021, and ended with, "I will hope that God will guide someone so that I can share and give testimony of God in my life." Someone in our state wrote to him in Spanish. Then he wanted to visit. She contacted me and I visited in March or April of last year. By this March, I was visiting him in Aberdeen every week. In July, he was transferred to Tacoma Detention Center, preparing to be sent to his home country of Guatemala. Together, his letter-writing friend and I gathered a backpack, clothes, and a phone for him to take with him. He called me from Guatemala, where he is living with his mother. I had sent information on Christian Science Church in Guatemala to him and the name and phone number of a Spanish-speaking practitioner. Elio had applied for membership in the Mother Church, but the Christian Science teacher I sent the application to wanted to wait for Elio's permanent address. Elio has not sent his permanent address to me. He called a couple of times from Guatemala. On the last call, it sounded like he asked for money, but there was suddenly an extra digit on the phone number, and I hung up thinking it might have been a scam. I have not heard from him since. Last year, Brent asked me to visit someone he had been visiting at King County Correctional Center in Seattle. My first visit downtown since COVID. Kevin had asked Chaplain Tim for something about Scientology and was given Science and Health. I never saw anyone so happy about reading Science and Health. He asked me to pray for him. The last time I visited, he was in shackles and did not want me to see him that way. He has not called or written back to say when he would want another visit. However, Lamar found Christian Science from Kevin and called from Western Washington Hospital in Lakewood last month, wanting Science and Health. I sent him a paperback copy, and he called November 1st saying he had received it and was on the 3rd chapter. Levi was at Kent Regional Justice Center in December 2023 when I first visited him. After several visits, he was sent to Port Angeles for treatment. In February, he wrote that he was graduating treatment and would be in North Seattle and wanted to keep in touch. I just wrote to him last week. I didn't see his letter. It was filed without my action on it. It was really embarrassing. Anyway, so maybe he'll write back. Years ago, a returning community member wrote to me from North Carolina. He is not interested in Christian Science, but is quite spiritually minded. One day, the letter came back, refused, so I stopped writing. After a while, he wrote again and had not refused my letter. He sent cards from Dave Spring, Live Your Faith. He is looking forward to being released.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. And on Zoom, it sounds like there's things. Can everyone on Zoom hear okay still? We have one last Fruiter's report and then a little benediction to end off. Alan, is anyone saying?
Hi, it's Jessica.
It's better now.
Okay, great, awesome. Yeah, just keep us posted. Thank you for that. Last, Dave has a letter to share from someone he's been visiting with for a month. Thanks to Boston.
Right.
Okay, my name is Dave Lau, and I want to share a letter/article. It was written by an individual that I met when I was serving at Monroe as a volunteer for 10 years, both in the reformatory as well as the special offenders unit. Since he was released, he asked for someone to mentor him. So we've been meeting once a month since 2015. I didn't realize, time flies when we're having fun, so that's pretty cool. So this was written actually last March 25th, 2024. And it's entitled From Prison to Praise. It says, I was introduced to Christian Science when I was incarcerated. In 2003, I discovered a stack of Christian Science Sentinels in the chapel on the mental health unit at the Monroe Correctional Center. I love the articles, but what most attracted me at first was sometimes the stunning photographs. I especially liked seeing the pictures of the man or woman who wrote the account of healing. I would imagine that they were there in person to keep me company. My mental health issues were complex, but one symptom that has plagued me all my life was that I would get anxious when it was necessary for me to carry on a conversation. When I heard that a Christian Science sponsor came to my unit once a month, I was interested but apprehensive. I eventually signed up to meet with Dave, but I was extremely fearful and preoccupied with that fear while anticipating the session. I was uncomfortable during the meeting, which at first I cut short, even though there was more time allotted to me. After a year or so, Dave stopped coming to my unit, but I still had his phone number. From that time on, I read Science and Health, and the Christian Science Sentinel reminded me far more my magazine. Always felt my mood lift when I saw the new issue on the chapel shelf. I apologize, I did not edit this. This is the way he wrote it, so please bear with me. At some point, Dave bought me a subscription to the quarterly Bible lesson, and after that, her dresser brought me a subscription to the Sentinel. While incarcerated, I believed that I had several healings. One from a somewhat major stroke, and a few more man and me arranged to meet in or stroke that followed. The first I experienced extreme alarming symptoms in my neck, but I remained calm and prayed. The area was painful for a few days, but eventually all discomfort left. The following minor symptoms were not noticeable, but not painful. Before I was released in 2015, I called Dave and asked him to be my Christian Science mentor. He heartily agreed once a month here in Marysville, even though he lived fairly far away. During the first couple of years, David brought me to several Christian Science lectures that were in various venues in the Puget Sound region. As was expected, I had many difficulties re-entering society after having been incarcerated for 13 years. My greatest frustration has often drove me to complete mental breakdown that resembled the temper tantrum of a child, as learning to use the computer or even a smartphone. I guess being incarcerated during that time for that long, there's no concept of what it is in current society. The monthly meetings and the occasional trips to the lectures helped me restore a sense of semblance of sanity until the next frustration discombobulated me. My first major health problem was difficulty breathing, which I attributed to the pollen from the hayfields that surrounded the house. These symptoms mirrored a diagnosis of asthma, supposedly triggered by cat fur and house dust that I suffered from as a child, and then again when I was a young adult who was smoking various substances. The symptoms sometimes persisted for hours or even days, but I never once resorted to physical remedies. Instead, I prayed. I considered calling a Christian Science practitioner, but was reluctant to pay the fee. My most dramatic healing took place a year or so ago. It was obvious It was obvious I had what a doctor would call a hernia. A portion of my intestine had protruded through my abdomen wall. I began the treatment with prayer. The crowning moment of faith was when I thanked God before the intestine was returned to where it belonged. Then, I believe, assisted the process of mentally imagining the wayward, misdirected piece of flesh pulling itself back into the abdomen cavity like a worm returning to its burrow. My most profound epiphany type moment occurred last summer when Dave and I were sitting under a tree at the spot where we meet to read the Bible lesson from the previous week and to talk. We were comfortable in cherishing the blessing of total peace. I was thinking, it doesn't get any better than this. Usually, my past experiences of feeling this blissfulness were almost always followed by some major disturbance, like a smelly, loud dirt bike roaring by. Instead, at that moment, two lovely ladies appeared. One was in her 80s, and the other was apparently her daughter. The mother gave off an aura of total peace, while the daughter was calm but alert, like she was protecting her mom from possible harm. The mother stopped, looked straight at Dave, and then smiled like she had known him all her life. She then walked toward me, toward my Christian Science mentor. He stood up, and they hugged like a mother and her long-lost son. That was when I felt totally embraced and surrounded by love with a capital L. After the two left, I was still floating a few feet above the ground. After coming back down, I asked Dave, "Did you know her?" I was only slightly surprised when he said, "No. I will never be the same again. I still meet with Dave monthly at that same spot. I'm no longer the same man I was back when I was released at the end of April. I gave all the credit to Dave, Mary Baker Eddy, God, and love. Thank you, Keith." There you go.
Really, before we before everyone, that is all the footage I know of, unless anyone else came ready to share something. But with that, I just want to send another thank you out to all our reps, to everyone who's attended online, watching the replay, here in person. This work is so vital and is seeing a real revival as restrictions fall down, as we continue that effective prayer going on. It's so wonderful to hear all the fruitage going on. And another huge thank you to Trevor. To end the benediction in the spirit of that work, watch, and pray. If we could all just say the 6-10 together, I think that'd be great. And we solemnly promise to watch and pray that the moment we is, which also in Christ Jesus, to do unto others as we would have them do unto us, and to be merciful, just, and pure. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you online. Wonderful rest of the day. Please enjoy it.